Welcome to the Two Money Guys podcast. I am the middle-aged money man, Robert Rio, along with your money geek, Michael Dinich, and we have an incredible show for you this week. We have Zachary Bouck on the show today. Zachary is the co-founder at Denver Wealth Management, and he is also one of the hosts of a podcast named Mind of a Millionaire. We are going to discuss Bouck's Rule, what the mind of a millionaire looks like, and even how a video game could help you become rich. But first, let's roll that intro. All right, today we are going to talk about the mind of a millionaire, and one way that you could help become a millionaire is to save money on life insurance. And you've heard us talk about the people over at JRC Insurance Group many times, and that's because we believe in what they do. JRC works with over 50 top-rated insurance companies to match their clients with the most affordable life insurance options available. And they are working harder than anyone to get you the coverage you need and deserve for the price that suits your budget. So you need to give them a call at 866-790-6494 or visit jrcinsurancegroup.com for your free, no-obligation quote. And after you're done, you can use some of that money you save to invest in your retirement. As I said in the intro, we have Zachary Bouck on the show today. Zachary is the co-founder of Denver Wealth Management, and he's also one of the hosts of the podcast named Mind of a Millionaire. So let's welcome Zachary Bouck to the show. How are you doing today, Zachary?
Hey, doing good, guys. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. Today, we're going to talk about the mind of a millionaire. And being the co-founder of a wealth management company, your goal is to obviously give financial guidance and, help people save money and invest. So going along the podcast route and that title, give us a little bit of your background and, where you came up with Mind of a Millionaire and what your ideas for that are and, basically a little background about yourself.
Yeah, so my business partner and I, my business partner's named Blair, we both came from pretty humble beginnings. I'm from a very small town in North Dakota. Business partner Blair grew up on ranches in New Mexico, and we both did not come from affluence. We both came from, without divulging too much about our background, we both came from relatively lower income families. We'll just say it that way. And coming from lower income families, you adopt the habits and the mindsets and the strategies that lower income families have. And when you're growing up that way, you don't realize it. You're just like a fish in water. You don't realize you're surrounded by the water. We didn't realize we were surrounded by the strategies and the ideas that typically lower income people have. So when we got through college, we both graduated within a couple of years of each other and found our way into the wealth management industry. All of a sudden, our pool changed. We went from having these preconceived notions of how to handle money and how to spend and how to invest. And when we actually looked at what the truly wealthy people were doing, and it's, it's a huge range. It's people from middle class all the way up to, $10 million plus. We realized that they were doing things that nobody had ever taught us. In fact, we had never thought about. So 7 years into having started Denver Wealth Management and having managed, over a couple $100 million now, we decided we wanted to basically start a podcast and discuss all of the things that wealthy people are doing that maybe if you grew up with lower income or grew up middle class, your parents never taught you. And they didn't teach you because they were bad people. They didn't teach you because they didn't know, because their parents had taught them the same middle class and lower income strategies. So that's basically what the podcast is. It's Blair and I sharing what we've learned from our unique perspective with the listeners of the podcast. And I think we're about 30 episodes in, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. And it is a different perspective because, I was brought up the same way, middle class, you're taught things a certain way financially. If you're not well-to-do or well-off, I know we were discussing things before the show. It's almost like nowadays in certain neighborhoods, I'm going to give you an example. The the 16-year-old kids are given Mercedes or BMWs as their first cars. That was unheard of when I was a kid. You got a low-cost car, a used car with a lot of miles on it. The budgets were different back then. It was every penny counted. I think it all is your perspective. And so what you're trying to do basically with the podcast is change people's perspectives, or at least show them a different way of budgeting, a different way of I guess, managing their finances than what they may be used to.
It's a different way of thinking. So actually, I can give you a
different way of thinking. Perfect. Yes.
I can give you an example based on what you just said. So I went to high school in the late 90s. My first car was a 1983 Buick Beauville. And if you Google Buick Beauville, you're going to see a full-size van with 15 passenger seats. Because I came from a family of 7 kids. So my car was the full-size van that had been in the family for about 18 years. And when you say these kids at age 16, they get a free Mercedes, my mind, the first instinct my mind has, it does this little travel back in time, like to Zach in high school with a busted old van, and the kid pulls up with the brand new, Ford Explorer that his mom or dad bought him for his birthday. And you feel jealousy. When you're a teenager, you feel a lot of jealousy. Like, that kid didn't earn that. That's not fair. Why does he have a nice Ford Explorer and I have this crappy old Buick Beauville? And that's a total mindset shift that first of all, it had to happen for me personally because I'm in the wealth industry. If a client comes in and they literally won the lottery and they've got a check for $2 million that they need to invest, and my emotional attitude towards them is, screw you, you didn't deserve that. Well, guess how many clients I'm going to get of that stature. So your mindset has to change to, man, that kid got a Mercedes at 16. He is so lucky. I'm so happy for him. That must be so freaking cool. His dad must work so hard to have that kind of money. And that's I'd probably say we got right into it here, but one of the biggest mindset changes you have to go from lower income to higher income, I think is being happy for people who are successful and celebrating other people's victories. And it's really hard. It's hard for me personally because when you said that, it triggered me to that old mindset. But then I had to do a little override. You know what? That kid's awesome. Congrats, man. You got a Mercedes. That's awesome. Your dad works hard. Your mom works hard. And that's the kind of thing we address on the show. And it's been fun. It's been fun to see how many different examples of that there are when it comes to personal finance.
Yeah, it does take a mindset shift. It's the keeping up with the Joneses mindset that's so cliche now, but it does take a definite mindset shift to be just almost not worry about what other people are doing, stay in your lane, do your own thing, and just be happy for somebody else who has what they have and be happy with what you have. So the Mind of a Millionaire, the name of the podcast. So what does the mind of a millionaire look like to you?
There's that's a big question. So it's like a big, easy softball, but it's also hard because I have to try and narrow down what the one thing they have in common. I would say,
well, I guess let's put it this way. So the mind of a non-millionaire, what is the first step that you have to take in order to develop the mind of a millionaire?
That's a good question. The biggest difference between the people, someone with a impoverished mindset and a wealthy mindset, and I love talking about this because it pisses people off who have this mindset. It's basically the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. And the perfect analogy for that is poker. If we're playing poker, we're all sitting around a poker table. Poker is a perfect zero-sum game. If you're going to lose chips or win chips, somebody else has to lose chips or win. So every victory you have comes at the expense of somebody else. And that game, that mindset, that zero-sum game mindset transfers a lot into business. So one of the things we do in our business is we go out and buy other businesses. Sometimes we'll be negotiating with another businessman or businesswoman, and they'll think of themselves as this tough negotiator. They think that if they're going to win, you have to lose. And all of the successful deals I've ever done and all the deals that have worked out really well have had the exact opposite mindset. And that's the abundance mindset. Abundance means to me that I can be successful and then you can be successful. And in fact, we can actually be more successful together. So if I don't screw you over on a deal and you don't screw me over and we both get a pretty fair deal, we'll probably both end up better off in the long run. So I think that's something that people who attract a lot of money into their lives attract good business relationships and attract opportunities. Because if I have a business opportunity, am I going to go tell the guy who tried to screw me over in a negotiation, or am I going to tell the guy who, had a big, long, honest conversation and we came to a middle ground? So I think that's the biggest thing is finding a way to have win-win situations with people and not be so scared that you're going to get screwed over, and also not ever trying to screw over anyone else.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good theory. I mean, who wants to go into something wanting to hurt somebody else in the decision? And I guess there are people like that, but I've never really understood that.
I don't think it's that they want to hurt them. I don't think they have maliciousness in their heart. I think it's the people that come from the scarcity mindset are scared. They just so they're not trying to screw anybody or take advantage of anybody. I mean, that might be the end result, but in their mind, their perception of the world is that there's, not enough to go around. They have to kind of, hoard what they have and fight and claw for, every opportunity. So it's really about, I would say, definitely shifting your mindset, but it's also about opening up your heart too, a little bit.
Michael, you said it better than you said it way better than I did. And I agree with the way you said it even more, which is it's not being out to hurt somebody. It's being so terrified that you've got the short end of the stick so many times in your life, being at the bottom of the totem pole or, real estate transactions or whatever, that you're just defensive. Your guards are up, your shields are up. You are not going to get taken advantage of. And it leads you to be a hard ass, and it, can sour a deal or a business deal or a good faith arrangement. And it hurts you in the long run.
Yeah, it really does. You ever watch the show The Shark Tank?
I have. Yep.
Okay. I love the Shark Tank. And then sometimes you'll see them negotiating with the sharks and the people lose the deal over 1 or 2%. Now I realize we don't, everything is heavily edited, so you don't really know what's going on. But every time my wife and I watch the show, I catch myself yelling oh my goodness, I can't believe you're going to lose a deal, negotiating with Damon, whatever, about 2%, right? Because it's giving up 2% to have 100 times, to have 80% of 100 times more than what you could have had on your own is more. But some people, they're just, because of their experience and their training, and, they just don't adopt this mindset. They're afraid to let that couple percent go.
Absolutely. And the place we see it the most is when you ask them, when we're talking to people about their financial goals, and we say, what do you want to do for your estate? What do you want to pass on to your kids or to your grandkids? And we always hear there's two different things, which tells me the mindset. The first one is, I want to bounce my last check. And, everybody laughed because it's a joke. But right. Kind of the idea is real. The idea is that I had to fight for everything that I got in my life. My parents didn't leave me anything. This is all mine. I'm going to keep it. It's not a bad person is not saying that. It's just someone who's really had a hard time fighting for their money. The other type of person says, I want to leave an inheritance to my children's children, and I want to have a wing at the hospital, and I want to donate or start a scholarship fund. And those guys typically have a whole lot more money. And I don't think they're more generous because they have more money. I actually think it's because they have been more generous their whole lives. They've actually just found a way to accumulate more money through it.
I agree. I know in my own life, and every time, and it's one of those things, I don't always get it right. I have to constantly remind myself. There's some times where my initial response is oh no, I don't, for a brief second, I don't want to, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to, because I might get taken advantage of or hurt or something. Just remind yourself, okay, no, I got to come from an abundance. I got to do the right thing. I'm going to donate to this person or pull over and help this person or whatever. So it doesn't always come easy, but I've opened myself up and tried to come from a period of abundance. It's overwhelmingly worked out much, much better.
Yeah. And I agree. And one of the ways we try and this is, in our business, this is not something we typically would do. If someone comes in here and they've got $5 million to invest, we don't have to work on their mindset. I mean, the idea with the podcast is we want to help some of those people who have that chance but don't know exactly how to do it. So one of the lessons or one of the exercises we have people do If you want to try an abundance mindset without risking any money or risking a business deal, which is kind of the example I gave, is next time something bad happens to you, like let's say you're walking out of your house to drive to work, you have a flat tire. This is a chance to use an abundance mindset, and it's not going to cost you financially, so you can kind of test the waters out a little bit before it can affect your pocketbook. But basically, the exercise is, what is the most positive thing that I can possibly think about that comes from a result of this tire being flat? Okay, well, I guess I could walk to work, which would be healthy, or maybe bike to work. I could meet an Uber driver and have a nice conversation. I could learn how to change a flat tire, which I've always wanted to do. I could ask my boss if I can work from home and maybe start a precedent from working from home. But basically, the idea is you take a rotten situation, which would totally be justified in reacting with negativity, and turn it around and give it total positivity. And that mindset, it's not exactly financial, but that same mindset can be pushed over into the financial world. A bad financial situation, how do we turn this positive? How can I make every positive even more positive? And you do that enough times, and you're going to start accumulating better relationships and accumulating more money.
It's amazing to me how many times in life non-financial mindsets and decisions do flow over to financial decisions, though. Being positive in one aspect of your life that's non-financial, at least for me, has definitely flowed over to my financial decisions. It just carries over into everyday life. And the more you do it in general, I think the more financially you end up doing it, and just become that person. You just become that abundance, the person of the abundance mindset, and it just takes over your entire life instead of compartmentalizing it into different aspects of your life. I think that's who you become. So, I mean, it's not just necessarily one facet of your life, but yeah, it's just instinct. You don't even have to think about it after a while, and that's just the way you are.
Yeah. And I was sitting here trying to think of any outliers. So like if I'm going to, my grandma's house, and my grandma's a lower income person, and I love her to death, does she have an abundance mindset or not? And interestingly, in some areas of life, she does have an abundance mindset. Like, for example, if you go to my grandma's house, she's going to stuff you full of coffee and cakes and cookies and pork and ham, and she's going to basically feed you like it's Thanksgiving, and she's going to be so generous and so giving when it comes to being a host or a hostess. And basically, my goal with people is, how do we find that and turn that into being generous in other areas of your life? Because you figured it out in this area, and you've seen how much joy it gives you, and you've seen how much joy it gives other people. How do we turn that into financial success? And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy, but there's enough people I've met out there that have come from lower income families to become wealthy that, I definitely know it's possible. And the more people we can pull up, the better off we're all going to be.
And here's a general question, and you don't have to answer it, but here's a general question. And do you think, or have you noticed, people from lower income demographic or people from higher income demographic seem to be more of the abundance mindset? I know there's a spattering of both, but in my area, just at events and people I've seen more of the lower income be abundant, of the abundant mindset. I mean, they are willing to give you the shirt off their back. They are willing to donate to whatever they need to, donate for. There are some higher income. I mean, there's definitely some philanthropists around here in my area that go above and beyond. But if you're looking for somebody to consistently go in the abundance mindset, it seems like the lower income demographic in this area, at least, is the one to go to.
I was just going to say, and hopefully I'm not putting my foot in the mouth here, but I've noticed, like, in my own life, it's not just income, high income versus low income, particularly with mindsets. I've actually noticed a little bit of a difference about how that income is derived also changes the mindset. Now, maybe the mindset impacts that, but there's a difference. There's a difference between somebody who's a physician's assistant and is making $100,000 a year. There's a difference between them. I've noticed in my own practice, there's a difference between them, and then there's a small business owner that's making $100,000. Those two people at $100,000, I don't think necessarily they're the same people. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And Rob, you actually just gave me a really good insight that I hadn't thought about before. So yeah, we're only 30 episodes into our podcast, so we're still trying to figure this out. But you made me remember, when I started in this industry 11 years ago, we were trying to get people with zero money invested to open their first Roth IRA with $25. And we'd go through their budget. And, and these are folks making $2,000 a month. And you look at their budget, and 200 is going to the church because you always tithe first. And 200 is going to their daughter's grocery budget because she just had a kid and she's trying to help them out. And then their son-in-law is living with them because they're out of work, and they're letting their brother-in-law use their car. And all of a sudden you look, these are the most freaking generous people in the entire world. And it's to their personal financial detriment. But when you look at their hearts, I mean, their hearts are the size of basketballs inside their chest. But for some reason, so you're right about that. And I've never quite thought about it in that way. But when you turn it around and say, let's invest $25 into the stock market, what's the first thing a lot of folks say? Oh, those are a bunch of crooks, and my friend lost all their money in the 2008 financial crisis, and they'll rob you blind, and they're a bunch of criminals. And there's an educational aspect to it. Like, I don't understand investing, so I don't want to put my money there. But there's also the psychology part of it, which is I'm afraid to take that risk, and I'm afraid to lose because I perceive these people to be criminal. So I think in your example, that person is super generous and a super big heart. But when it comes to investing in money, in growing it for themselves, that's where we can help them have an abundance mindset.
No, I agree. If you take the natural traits and natural tendencies of abundance and educate on how to use that mindset to grow their money as well, I think it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. So maybe somehow we have to feed Rob. You can help me if you think of an idea, because so far the podcast is the best idea we have. But how do we take people with that big heart and great attitude when it comes to their personal life and make them feel like investing and growing their assets is just going to enhance their life?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing, I think that, there are some people, they do fear, the stock market, but I think a lot of times, particularly with reaching out to those things, and this is one thing that I think the financial journalists and financial bloggers and everything don't understand about financial advisors. And, you can probably relate with this. But, the bloggers and the journalists and the media, they want to write about like the perfect solution. And financial advisors, when they're meeting with people, sometimes we're just looking for comparative improvements, right? So, for example, we might realize, okay, this isn't the best thing ever, but if we can just get that person, that wasn't saving at all and take that first step to save $25 a month, even if they put it in the bank, right? Or maybe they put it into a CD instead of going to the stock market. Well, that's okay. Yeah, we'd maybe want them to do more with it down the road. But if we can get them from nothing to 25 in a CD every month, that's a comparative improvement, and that's a huge win.
Yeah. And then from a behavioral standpoint, you go from a CD to a money market, and a money market to a short-term bond, and a short-term bond to a government bond. And before long, they might actually grow their money. But yeah, that might be a good way to just address the behavioral part of investing.
Yeah, especially too, because I noticed because we do this particularly with young kids and stuff. So when you have zero, there's just like no light at the end of the tunnel. So like a lot of times, you just want to get them saving a little bit. And if they can just start saving a little bit and then they see that account growing a little bit, then that starts getting them thinking about more ways they can add more money and more ways they can get that money earning money. And then they start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and the results and everything, and they start getting excited about it, right? It's kind of like why, if you look at most diets, like this is funny because, the fitness industry knows how to get people, fit, and they use a totally different model. Where in financial planning, we kind of say to people, like, sign on to this system for this long-term behavioral change, where the diets are normally like, hey, do this thing for 2 weeks and lose 14 pounds or whatever it is, or 10 pounds, because they know if you do a calorie restricted diet for a couple of weeks, you're going to lose some weight. And then if you lose some weight and start feeling better, then hopefully you're going to start getting addicted to fitness. And that's normally how, like, if you talk to most bodybuilders, that's usually how they became professional bodybuilders, right? They're at one point in time, they're like, hey, I'm going to go to the gym and run. Right. And then they said, hey, I'm going to start lifting some weights. The next thing you know, they get addicted to it and they love it and they become, bodybuilders and everything. So, the path to saving sometimes takes that same step. You just got to get a little bit of wind to get your kind of foot in the door and then start using that to leverage to the next position and the next position.
You're right. The addictive, I have exactly the addictive bug that you mentioned when it comes to savings. Every single goal whether it's 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. In my mind, I think I've got to get to this next step. And as soon as I get there, it's not satisfying at all because I want to get to the next step. But from a retirement planning perspective, hey, it keeps you on track and it keeps your wealth growing. So there's certainly a percentage of the population that's going to find that addictive mindset when it comes to personal finance.
Rob, did we lose you? All right. He when I start talking about fitness, he had a bad run-in with the Couch to 5K app. And then every time I start talking about fitness and how it is an analogy for finances, he kind of disappears a little on me.
Yeah, I'm doing a modified Couch to 5K. It's more like the Couch to 5 feet.
See, I think what happens, particularly with the diet. So I think the fitness industry does a good job, but there are always kind of the extremist things. But the other thing too is we've talked about this on the podcast before. It's people for whatever reason, and this probably falls into the mindset of a millionaire as well. But we've noticed that people love, not everybody, but there's a group of people that just love like bad ideas, right? Like the worse the idea is, it's like, I don't know if bad ideas are just like sexier than good ideas, but there's a certain group of people that like the more convoluted the idea is, or the crazier, or the more it seems like almost like a scam, actually, the more people love it. And I think that's the reason why, people get taken by these politicians, getting taken by these Ponzi schemes and everything. It's not because this Ponzi scheme person was making it seem like a good idea, right? They were actually making it seem like a bad idea, but they were going to let these people in on the ground floor of this.
Yeah, thing. I don't have an answer for that. What do you guys think? I can't tell you how many of the people I know who get involved in one multi-level marketing scheme after another. 1 week they're selling cherry juice, and the next week they're selling essential oils. The next week they're buying what do they call them? Tax repos, and just every month they're up to some nonsense scheme, and they keep falling for it over and over.
Well, they've actually done some studies on this. I wish I would have saved them, but they've actually done some studies on this, and particularly they've done these studies with voters, and it's like, well, people who aren't successful can't recognize good ideas. So that's why we get these politicians that come up with these really wacky ideas, because the people that are maybe voting for them, they've never really been super successful in their own careers. They maybe never run a business. So they can't recognize the difference between a good idea
That's fascinating.
and a bad idea.
Are we revisiting this? Are we revisiting this topic from previous episodes?
I'm not guys.
You guys need
I'm not going to
talk. You made my jaw drop when I heard that, because I hadn't heard that previous podcast. I've never heard that before, but it makes so much freaking sense.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to mention it. Although, Rob, everyone's going to pick on me. But do you remember when Newt Gingrich was running for president, he was running for president, but it was in the Republican primary?
I don't. That must have been before my time.
Yeah, it was it was a couple elections ago, and he was running and he was just going from location to location, just putting out the wackiest ideas. These were ideas that I tell Rob the idea. I just repeat what Newt Gingrich said. I tell Rob this, and he's like, "No, you're making that up, Michael." I'm like, "No, this is."
Oh, he had the moon base.
Yeah,
he had the moon base.
Idea, yeah, right? and Rob's like,
"Oh my God, somebody else knew about the moon
Rob's
base."
like, "No, that's not. That's not what he said. You're just doing your thing and getting it wrong."
Okay, but not just any moon base.
A moon sex base,
Michael? A moon sex base.
that idea just keeps getting better, you guys. So maybe I'm part of the demographic that doesn't know a good idea when I hear it, because that sounds pretty awesome.
Well, that was his idea. But Rob thinks I'm making the whole thing up, and that was his plan, and people loved him for it. This is also
we're going off on a tangent here, but this is also coming from a guy who thinks that if he falls asleep on a park bench, his kidneys are going to get jacked, literally stolen out of his body.
Yeah, I don't know, in Mexico maybe, but not.
Yeah.
See, Zach's my boy. He's backing me up on everything here today.
Yeah,
I'll have to look for that study, but you have to look it up. But they've done studies on it, and if you talk to any business owner, I remember listening to I think it was an NPR or something. And it was the guy who created Edible Arrangements. And Edible Arrangements, that's a pretty big business, and that's pretty successful. I don't know what they are revenue wise or cap wise or whatever, but it's a big enough company, I think, right? And he the Edible Arrangements guy was yeah, I went I went to all these VC firms and everything. I went to all these investors, and everyone's like, no, edible arrangements is stupid. Nobody wants to do that. It's not going to be a thing, right? And if you talk to most business owners, a lot of business owners, and particularly the real successful ones, they all will have a similar story like that. They're like, yeah, we went and nobody thought that this was going to be a thing.
Yeah. And, I think we were talking about, voting for politicians with bad ideas, tying it back to money. I mean, if you look at the stock market chart for the past 50 years by the S&P 500, you've made 10% a year for the last 50 years. And still somehow people are falling in Denver. They do these like trading seminars where it's come look how old guy Steve turned $10,000 into $10 million in 50 days. And it's $5,000 for the class and the arena is sold out. If those same guys would just put the dang 10 grand in the stock market and forget about it, they'd have substantially more money. So I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about how to stop them from doing bad ideas. I guess I kind of think of how do we get you to do a good idea, but that might.
Well, the key is to make a good idea look like a bad idea. So that's
you have to find a way to package this good idea in a nice, shiny, bright way to make it look dumb. Pretty much. Like people just love. Like I've seen people come into the office with plans that were set up with people, and they're just so like needlessly complicated. Like, do you remember a couple of years ago, back when the federal estate tax credit was a lot lower, and people were doing like,
it was like $1.5 million.
And people were doing like they were like setting up trusts. What do they call it? I can't think of the term. Oh, premium finance life insurance. So they were like borrowing money from. There's like setting up like second to die policies, putting it into like an irrevocable trust, borrowing money from a bank to pay the premiums, and just these like really convoluted, schemes and everything to avoid like the federal estate tax.
Yeah, I do.
When like all they really had to do was like set up a trust and, make sure that all their, everything was titled properly. Right. And, but people are selling these things and people just gravitate toward these really convoluted, plans. Or
like have you heard of Australian mortgages? They call them something different every year, but have you heard of that concept?
No.
It's a total scheme, but basically they say take your 30-year mortgage, change nothing, and pay it off in 6 years. Well, the most basic financial calculator, common sense, your grandma can figure out it's not going to happen, but you watch their 40-minute YouTube video and you get convinced that if you open a checking account with them, you can pay off your mortgage in 6 years. And it's absolutely insane. And it doesn't work, but somehow these companies are in business and flourishing. So I guess maybe the first thing you get people to do is stop playing the lottery. If me and you decided to start our own lottery, we would go to jail for criminal enterprise. But somehow the states, at least in Colorado, the state of Colorado runs a lottery that is basically fleecing the lower income half of the population. And that's like the most obvious way to lose money every single time you invest it. So maybe you can stop the bad idea of the lottery, and maybe that's one where you can say, stop buying lottery tickets, start saving here, and see if you can make some good changes.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, you're going up against, you're going up a pretty powerful industry there with the lottery. The government, anything that the government profits from is, they're going to fight to protect.
No, I wasn't suggesting I actually start a lottery, but we had, if you could convince people to stop paying and investing into it. I wish I knew this stat off the top of my head, but I think it's like $750 million in Colorado gets pumped into that lottery. And then I think 375 comes back out as winnings, and these numbers could be totally off, but a whole bunch of money just gets sucked up by the state and gets taken out of it just gets taken out of the bottom half of the population.
The problem with the lottery is it kind of fits in like what's like the really popular sales tack? It's that kind of minimization, right? Where, you don't tell people, oh, this car is going to cost you $32,000. You tell people, what's the car salesperson says when you show up on the lot. You ask if you say, how much is the car? He always says, well, how much do you want to spend each month?
Right.
Right. And then when they want to upsell you on, static cling protection on your interior, right? It's like, well, it's only the cost of, 25 cents a day. They don't tell you it's $1,200, over the, 5 years of the loan or whatever, right? So that's the thing with the lottery. When people are looking at that lottery ticket and they're going, oh, it's only $1, it's only $2, it's only this. They've kind of minimized it in their mind, and they've fallen into that kind of mentality that it's only $1 or $2 or $3 or a cup of coffee. And what they really have to learn is what that $1 or $2 over periods of time.
One of the things we've started telling people is that even though money is just one thing, money is money. You have to start thinking about it like two things. You have money, which is consumable, right? So if I take my money to Starbucks and buy coffee, I've spent my money, I've used it, it's gone forever. But there's a different type of money, and that's called capital. And capital is what you build your long-term wealth with. So once you take your capital, which is still money, but let's start using a fancy word for it, and you put that into an investment account or a savings account or a 401k, that is now in your mind forever capital that should never be touched. And if you can just always have some money to set aside for your capital, for your growth, that's good. Even if it is $25 a month. I mean, if you can start at $25 a month, get yourself addicted to building up that capital, you're going to be one of these guys in their 50s and 60s who have, enough money to retire with dignity. I don't know exactly how much money you'll have, but I know it's going to be more than if you didn't invest anything at all.
Yeah. It could be a lot. I mean, especially too, and this is like a lot of things that people that are like lower income, they don't realize is that there are actually there's incentives. Like the government actually has incentives, tax incentives for people who are lower income to encourage them to save. And they'll actually, indirectly match their savings. They have the retirement savers credit. I mean, the retirement savers credit will effectively give you up to 50% back for whatever you're contributing to either traditional retirement accounts, or even better yet, a Roth retirement account, right? And so a lot of people don't know that. So, just a couple dollars a day could build up, with those incentives, could be worth $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year in retirement savings. You could literally have someone going from the position where they didn't think they could save it all for retirement to putting away $4,000 or $5,000 a year and be in a much better situation.
Yeah. And, in addition to that, so that retirement tax credit's awesome. In addition to that, like in Colorado, for example, they have a 529 match. So if you put money into a 529 for your child, you live in Colorado and you meet their income requirements, which are, they're capped because it's not for the guy making $250,000 a year. They'll match your 529 contribution. So you put in $50, they'll be right alongside you with $50 right there. That's 100% return. I can't say the word guaranteed, but as of previous years has been very consistent. And there are all these incentives that they're putting out there. And, I'm just trying to see how many of these different incentives we can put in front of people and see if we can get more people saving and more people investing.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to do the same thing. And those programs are great. And I think a lot of people, they just don't get the knowledge because I think sometimes they're afraid to, maybe like they don't think they have enough to maybe talk to an advisor, or they don't know who to kind of, turn to. And that's why podcasts like yours is so great, because they can, listen to that and get all that information, for free. So it's such a great program, and it's such a great model that you're running.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, the other thing you can do is libraries. I mean, if we talked about abundance mindset, I'd say the second best thing you can do is go to the library and start reading like a maniac. I mean, it's free. It's the best deal in the world. You can sit there, you can read any book you want, any newspaper, any magazine, any periodical, and you can grow. That's probably my second thing here is that the wealthier people are, the typically better educated they are, but that doesn't mean they've got a master's and a PhD. It means they've spent their life consciously learning different subjects, getting better at things, and always learning. So if you don't have any money, if you're in debt, the library is still free to you. So get your butt down to a library and start learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I love to see people compounding their knowledge in that way as well.
And I think that is the perfect segue into our first article. And if you have time, we're going to go into it. Zachary, you have a little bit of time to go into an article?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Recently, Zachary sat down and spoke with our own money geek about a concept that he came up with and dubbed Bouck's Rule. And it comes from an article on Your Money Geek, from an article on yourmoneygeek.com entitled Bouck's Rule and the Mind of a Millionaire. So would you like to explain Bouck's Rule to our listeners, Zachary?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I have all these ideas that bounce around in my head, and I never say out loud to anybody, so I don't know how convoluted they are. But when I was interviewing Michael on our podcast, I just kind of blurted this out, and now it's become somewhat of a thing. Basically, this was early in my career. This rule has served two purposes in my career. So the rule, just to start it off here, is that for every hour you spend on a particular activity per day, you should read one book per year. So if you spend 8 hours at work, you should read about 8 books per year about your work, about self-development. If you spend 1 week in church, you should spend 1 week if you spend 1 hour in church, read one book about spiritual development. If you spend 3 hours a day watching Netflix, go read 3 fiction books, right? So it's basically, when I started in my career, it was a way for me to get away from reading fiction all the time and start trying to take my career track a little more seriously. Because earlier on in my life, I was just reading, fiction books, some classics, some modern books, but I wasn't really developing in my career. So I said, well, this is basically a way for me to read 8 books about my business. And then as my career progressed, I became a little bit more stale and only started reading nonfiction. And I was like, you know what? I think it'd be cool if I read a book about golfing. And I think it'd be cool if I read a book about biking. And I think it'd be cool if I read a book about music. And for me, it's become a rule where you can still read books about what's most important to you, but make sure you're still diversifying your attention to continue to read interesting and new things.
Yeah, and I like that. You have it broken down. I mean, in this article, you have it broken down, or Michael has it broken down, depending who wrote this part of it. But it's basically the section Why Bouck's Rule Rocks. And I mean, I like the fact that it says it forces you to take different views on certain subjects, which may open your eyes to trying new tactics in the workplace or in your own financial life. And it kind of breaks it down for examples, if you, and you even have like the average person, the according to the annual time use survey in the U.S., people on average spend their 24 hours every weekday. There's 1.09 hours eating and drinking.
How cool is it to read a book about like pizza or, Italian food?
I know. And it's like, well, you should read a book on dieting or eating pizza or something. I mean, you even take that into account. Now, obviously, let's not read a book on sleeping, something like that. But you could, I guess, if you really wanted to. But, 3.32 hours watching TV and leisure activities. So, yeah, why don't you read books on actors or certain movies or, things like that? I mean, it will definitely broaden your mind and your view on things. I think this is a great concept. And it's definitely,
yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. And they just did, somebody just did I really got to start like writing down when I read like research. But I just saw someone come up with research the other day that said just even reading fiction, is good for your mind. And it can actually make you, more successful. So like sometimes I think we got to read, all about, business or all about money. But just reading more of anything just makes you a better person.
Yeah, I actually pulling two of these conversations together, I just reserved Thrawn at the library here. And
nice.
There's a wait list on it. But no, some of the best lessons since I started doing this, some of the best lessons I've learned have come from fiction. And I think one of the book that stands out the most is Robinson Crusoe. And this was based on I go camping and I go hunting and I like to have little adventures throughout the year. And I thought, I should read a book about an adventure. And that's where Robinson Crusoe gets, thrown into an adventure and stranded on an island. And there is more wisdom in that book than I would say half of the nonfiction books I've ever read. I mean, just the being in the mindset of being stranded and alone on an island and what's important to you and reliving all your past experiences, it gives you so much perspective. So even if you just wanted to maximize your business and financial success, I think there's allocation for fiction in that book diet as well.
Yeah, I think any kind of reading is educational, fiction or nonfiction. I mean, it definitely opens up your mind, and you learn things from fiction. It may not be facts and figures, but you definitely are learning to escape. It's almost, fiction is more of a way to build your imagination and strengthen your imagination, and a way to escape, but you are definitely still benefiting from that. And I think you should go both ways. I think you should go both directions there.
Yeah, I guess it depends on which bias you're coming from. I've come from both biases. I'm reading all fiction and not developing my career. And then I've come from, I'm reading all nonfiction and I'm becoming boring, because I'm not developing as an interesting person. I'm developing as a business robot. So you kind of have to do both of those things.
Oh yeah, you definitely need to incorporate both. In order to advance, as we were saying before, you need to advance your career and you need to advance your life. You definitely need to educate yourself by reading books. And like you were saying, if you're working 8 hours a day, you should definitely try to fit those 8 books a year in dealing with your career. I mean, that's definitely a way to advance in your career and meet your financial goals.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to point out, just kind of too, we're talking about reading, and I think reading is great, and actually reading is great because I think it improves your writing, and there's a lot of skills to it. But if you don't have necessarily the time to read, I highly recommend. Books on tape. Well, they're not books on tape anymore, but they're audiobooks. I highly recommend. Worst case scenario, if you're driving to work, listen to an audiobook. If you can't afford the audiobook, you can usually get them through your library even, right? Or get one of the apps. There's a lot of ways to get, free copies of the audiobooks, because that's great. And then also, audiobooks are great. Everyone kind of thinks of audiobooks as like a thing to do on the road, but audiobooks are actually a great thing to listen to your family. So, we talked about Thrawn. I actually got the audiobook version of that, and my family all kind of listened to it together, right, after I had read the book. And it was a great experience and everything. And they can even just approve from just listening to the book. And it's so much different than even just watching something on TV.
Yeah. And
I come from the books on 8-track.
Yeah, no. And that's another opportunity for a mindset. So that's where if someone says, man, I commute an hour each way. My life is tough. How do you turn that around into an opportunity? You have 2 hours in the car to do whatever you want. Oh my gosh, spend 30 minutes listening to an ebook about something you want to learn about, and spend 30 minutes calling your friends or your family or your coworkers. It's kind of painful being that painfully optimistic, but if you want to make a change in your life, that might be, how you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Throw ebooks in the car, and all of a sudden your commute becomes something you look forward to, as opposed to something you want to complain about.
That is Bouck's rule. And it's a great article. Everybody should go check it out. YourMoneyGeek.com. The article is entitled Bouck's Rule and the Mind of a Millionaire. You definitely want to check that out. And there is a challenge at the end. Zachary does challenge everybody to read a book for every hour that you spend doing something during the day. So
I guess that would be 16 books a year if you sleep 8 hours a day.
So, yeah, I think that's completely doable. I know we're all busy and we're all trying to struggle to find those minutes and seconds during the day. But like you guys were talking about, there's Audible, there's everything. You can sit and listen to podcasts during the day. Don't turn our podcast off. Don't do it. But you can sit there and listen to it. If you have a job like I do, I sit and I program all day. I can sit there and listen to a book all day if I really wanted to. So there's plenty of time where you can find to do this. And it's great. It's a great challenge. And I think on both websites. So why don't we challenge our listeners and you challenge your listeners, and then we'll see what comes of it. We'll try to take a tally possibly and see how many hours of book reading we can get in.
Yeah, we could do a Twitter poll. I have one caveat, and as someone who's read countless nonfiction books in my life, it has become painfully obvious to me that most nonfiction books have a very good premise, a very good first couple chapters, and then all of a sudden it becomes very obvious that they have 100 pages to fill, or they don't get to sell their book, or they don't get it published. So a lot of these nonfiction books, maybe Good to Great is my favorite example of that. It's a great idea, it's a great premise, and then it's 50 freaking case studies. Okay, you know what? If I read 5 case studies, I got the general idea. So you don't necessarily have to read every book word for word, beginning to end. If you have a book that tapers off halfway through and is just wasting your time, go to the conclusion and call it a victory. So I don't necessarily read chapters 1 through 50. I might read chapters 1 through 20 and then the end of it, because a lot of these fiction or nonfiction books are just using up paper to meet a quota.
There you go. Mr. Bouck gave you permission to cheat. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. One person actually asked me how I read so many books. And I told him, I think you actually said a little bit better than I did. But I always say, well, if you read a lot of business books, eventually you get to the point where you can almost, I don't want to say skim them, but like you said, you get to this point where you can just kind of start maybe skipping over a little bit of the antidotes and things, because you're familiar enough with the concepts and everything that you can actually move through the books, much quicker than you may realize when you're first starting out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a learned skill, but most of those books don't need to be read cover to cover.
This article, our second article, is from ESIMoney.com. It is entitled How Assassin's Creed Can Help You Become Wealthy. I enjoy video games like anybody else. Michael, what do you think? You a video game junkie?
I don't know if I'm a video game junkie, but I have a healthy love for video games.
All right. You like war games, you like shooters, you like adventure games. What do you like?
I like RPGs. So, for example, like Knights of the Old Republic, Fallout, the Fallout series. I like those type of games.
What about you, Zachary? You play, or you?
I do. About 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, when I wanted to get serious about my business career, I took the video game system out of my house, which had two really positive effects. One is I didn't waste time playing video games at my house. And two, when I want to play video games, I have to go see my friends. So I go to my friend's house and play Call of Duty, and we haven't played Halo in a few years, but a lot of first person shooters. So we're playing PlayStation VR these days. I'm also a big Magic the Gathering online nerd, so I play that as well.
Okay.
But
so
yeah, not RPGs for a while now.
All right. Well, this article is about Assassin's Creed. There's a lot of different sequels to Assassin's Creed. Basically, what they're saying in this article is they go over the Assassin's Creed game. Basically, they give a Wikipedia description of it just so everybody knows what Assassin's Creed is. And they're to summarize it, Assassin's Creed is an action-adventure stealth video game by Ubisoft. I'm going to kind of summarize it. So you're an assassin who fights for peace with free will, and the Templars who desire peace through control. It features historical fiction, science fiction characters intertwined with real-world historical events and figures. So basically, it's using real-world historical events in the storylines. It's a free-roaming, third-person video game. And you're an assassin, and you're running around, and you need to increase your skills, increase your weapons, purchase weapons, complete missions, do things like that. So the author of this post, he goes into a lot about the video game, all right? A lot about the history of the video game, a lot about why he plays it, but the main purpose of this is how this video game correlates to financial knowledge or financial well-being. And the character in this video game, in order to increase levels or become better in the game, needs to purchase weapons. So you need to save money. You need to complete missions that pay you money. You need to save that money, and then you need to purchase weapons. So you have decisions in this game. Do you want to save more money to buy better weapons? Do you want to spend the money you have on a weapon that may or may not be better? Same with experience points. If you've ever played video games, you have experience points that you gain for every mission you complete. Do you want to use those experience points now? Do you want to save them for later? This type of gameplay has been around forever, but it does correlate to financial world, I believe. It's kind of like do I want to spend it now? Is this money burning a hole in my pocket, or do I want to kind of save it and get something a little better? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this post. It was written by ESI Money, who was like a mentor of mine, and I have so much love and respect for. And his blog is normally pretty serious. So just the fact that he did this post, I just think is hilarious. And I love, I agree with the financial lessons on it, but I just really like that someone who's normally so kind of like straight laced and everything on his blog, decided to kind of show a fun side of money. And I love this kind of concept that, hey, we can learn money lessons from fun things. And I think that's just such a great way of, teaching money lessons, particularly to like the younger versions of ourselves, or like the people that are the younger versions of ourselves who normally wouldn't, listen or tune in, to a financial lesson.
Yeah, he kind of describes it as, he claims he doesn't, he showed like the hours that he's played video games, like the PlayStation says, oh, you've played like 1,300 and some hours this, and he's like, well, I don't think that's true, and it's funny because he goes into the depth of the game. He's like, well, I'm a money nerd, but I'm a video game nerd. And he kind of goes on about the game and then finally gets into the money end of it. But he's right. It's like, it's risk and reward. It's save your money. It's sound financial stuff, but you want to be that with the big weapon that can just kick everybody's butt eventually. And how are you going to get there? Are you going to invest wisely, or are you just going to spend all the money you have? It just kind of comes down to that in the end.
Yeah. It's a perfect analogy, because one of the things we always tell folks is the most important thing is to figure out what you want to do first. And if you figure out what you want to do, it makes a lot of these seemingly difficult financial choices a lot easier. So when we're playing video games, I'm not a serious gamer, in the sense that my goal when I play a video game is to have as much fun as possible. So if I'm going to maximize my, utility playing a video game by buying an outlandish costume, getting a tacky, ineffective weapon, and running around causing problems, well, if that's how I like to play my video games, that's fine, because I'm going to get the most fun out of it. Now, if I'm a serious gamer and I want to, hoard money to get the best weapon to have the most victories, that's a way a lot of other people play it as well. So I think it starts with what am I looking for playing Assassin's Creed? Do I want to beat this and feel really cool and really, like an official, 1400s or 1500s assassin? Or do I just want to mess around and do as many side projects in the game as possible? It kind of just depends on what you get out of video games, which is a good analogy for spending. Are you trying to take as many vacations as possible, or are you trying to hit financial independence as soon as possible?
Do you think it mirrors your real life? Do you think you play this game? Do you think a lot of people will play this game with the personality that they have in real life financially?
Oh, for me, I'd say it's the total opposite. I'm pretty darn serious about money. So to go into a video game with a total nonsense attitude and not be competitive and just be silly is actually very satisfying for me. So I'm like the polar opposite of my real life persona. What about you guys? Do you guys play? Are you serious?
How about you, Michael? Michael, are you gonna spend the money on like a red cape and stuff, or what?
I think that my online personas actually, like on video games, and also like my wife and I, my whole family, we enjoy tabletop gaming. And I actually find that my personas and my characters kind of like replicate my own personal opinions. But my wife likes to be like the antithesis in games of what she's like in real life. So we'll play like Star Wars, like X-Wing miniatures tabletop game. And I have to be like the rebels, because I can't be like the Empire, because I just can't, be the bad guy or whatever. Right. And whereas she actually loves being the bad guy, and, all the, kind of shenanigans and everything that they kind of get to do. So,
hey, I got to say, tabletop games, for me, my family growing up was a huge tabletop game family. Monopoly, the Game of Life. Game of Life actually is, talk about a direct correlation to financial learning. What a great way to educate your kids on a million different things: sportsmanship, rules, winning, thinking ahead, thinking strategically. That Star Wars TIE Fighter game, I played that. That game is super hard though. That's a mind melter.
Well, but it's a great. It's like one of those. It's like one of those games where it takes a little bit of time to kind of learn the rules, but once you get the hang of it, you just kind of get entrenched in it. But tabletop gaming is one of, and even video gaming, I think, is actually one, because people kind of think of it as frivolous, but it's actually, I think, one of the best values in entertainment. We have a tabletop gaming shop, and we can go in there and spend, on a game tournament day, it's maybe $15 to get in for the day, and you spend 5-6 hours as a family together, all playing kind of games and competing with other people and meeting new people. That's one of the best values in entertainment going.
Yeah. Even poker, we used to play poker, hearts, go fit, all the different card games. And yeah, you learn a lot playing that stuff. So yeah, video games too. I guess I can't say I play many family video games since my kids aren't quite old enough to play video games.
Yeah. See, my kids are older now, so we don't play video games together anymore, but we used to. So, it kind of cycles out. Yeah. So, this article is great. It's a fun way of teaching people, it's a great analogy as far as teaching people about finance and the younger generation. I'm not going to say the younger generation because the older generation plays video games too, but it's a fun way of teaching maybe non-financial people about finances. And, it's a great way, a different way to look at it. And it's a great read. It's a great read.
Yeah, I think so. I think everyone, just the comments alone, I love the comments on that post. So everyone
there are so many comments on it, and yes, the comments are great. You need to read the comment thread.
Yeah, you should go on the ESI site. It is a great site, and check out that blog post. It's really a great blog post.
All right, Zachary, I want to ask you one last thing before we head out. Do you have anything coming down the pike that we should know about, or you want to talk about?
Yeah, we're very very active in Denver. So if you're a Colorado-based person, we have all sorts of events that we're doing locally here. So we're doing the big thing we have coming up now is called the Heart and Stroke Walk, where we have a team. We're going to ride do you guys know what the triple bypass bike ride is? It's basically a road bike ride where you ride over 3 mountain passes in one day, 130 miles, and it's up and down the whole way. We're doing that as a group if anyone wants to come join us there. Austin and I have been working on an ebook for the past couple months now. Basically, we've been working on putting a lot of these ideas that we've been talking about on the podcast into book form. We actually just got approved by our compliance department today. So by the time this podcast comes out, there's a good chance you'll be able to download our ebook. We're going to do it for free. The podcast is free. The ebook is free. Our goal is to get this message out here. So we're going to have an ebook here probably in the next 30 days or so, since we have everything approved. And, we're looking to grow. We're looking for people who have more ideas. If you have an idea that you think would be beneficial for us to include, or a strategy that worked for you, please share it with us. Our only goal is to get more people financially successful than there are now. So we'll take all ideas and all people who want to share thoughts with us.
All right. Wonderful. Yeah. We would like to thank Zachary Bouck for joining us on the show today. And we are going to have all of the links in the show notes to the sites and social media. We look forward to maybe having you on the show again when the ebook comes out and talking to you again.
Awesome, guys. Thank you much.
I would like to thank our sponsor, JRC Insurance Group. JRC works with over 50 top-rated insurance companies to match their clients with the most affordable life insurance options available. They are working harder than anyone to get you the coverage you need and deserve for the price that suits your budget. Call 866-790-6494 or visit jrcinsurancegroup.com for your free, no-obligation quote. Again, call 866-790-6494 or visit jrcinsurancegroup.com for your free, no-obligation quote.